All right, in this lesson we're going to be going over angle pairs. I'm probably not going to get this done in one video, so I'm going to split it up and then splice it together. I want to go over the standards first. Your first standard, it's going to be familiar. Know and apply precise definitions of the language of geometry. Understand properties of line segments. We covered that. Angles is next. We have not messed with circles. We're not going to get into perpendicular and parallel lines yet. Kentucky HSG 6, you're going to apply theorems for lines, angles, triangles, and parallelograms. We're going to specifically talk about angles and the lines that form them, okay? So we've got some theorems here. So the first term we're going to talk about is adjacent angles, and it says adjacent angles are two coplanar angles with a common side, a common vertex, and no common interior points. Interior points. Okay? So it helps to draw this picture first. So I'm going to draw two rays out and a ray in the middle. So these are adjacent angles. They're right by each other. They're two coplanar, so they lie in the same plane. Angles with a common side. Okay, so this angle has a common side as this one. A common vertex, so they meet at the same turning point. This is a vertex. And no common interior points. So there is no common interior points. And we're going to call this one angle 1 and this one angle 2. So the examples over here would be angle 1 and angle 2 are adjacent angles. Vertical angles are two angles whose sides are opposite rays. Opposite rays. And one of the first theorems that we're going to talk about is that vertical angles are congruent. So if you have two vertical angles, they're going to be congruent. Let's take a look at an example. So let's say I've got two lines. One line goes this way. One line goes this way. And I've got angle 2, angle 4, angle 1, angle 3. Well, vertical means straight across from each other, okay? So this angle is a vertical angle with angle 3, so that means those two things are congruent, okay? So that tick just means that one tick means it's congruent to other one ticks. So this tick, they're congruent. Same thing with angle 2 and angle 4. They're vertical angles, so I can say that this angle is the same as this angle, the same measure as that angle. So not the same angle, but so we have that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, and then we have angle 2 is congruent, so an equal with the squiggle above it, to angle 4. So that just means congruent. Congruent. Okay, complementary angles are two angles whose measure have a sum of 90 degrees. Each angle is called the complement to the other. So you might see angles that look like this, or you might see two angles that are not necessarily adjacent, but they still form a complementary pair. So I've got 40 degrees here, and they have to add up to 90. So let's say I have another angle here that's B, which is 50 degrees. So they're two separate angles, but they add up to be 90. 40 plus 50 is 90. So, and then over here, if you take a look, if I draw this little box in, that means 90 degrees. So if you see a box inside of an angle, a little square, it means 90 degrees. That angle is 90 degrees. We have that angle 1 plus angle 2, or the measure of angle 1 plus measure of angle 2 is going to equal 90. Okay? So they are a complementary pair. So angle 1 and angle 2 are complementary. Angle A and angle B are complementary. Supplementary angles are two angles whose measure have a sum of 180 degrees. Each angle is called the supplement. And we've got a similar situation, right? If I draw a straight line across and I've got a ray extending off of that, I've got angle 1 over here and angle 2 over here. Angle 1 and angle 2 are supplementary. Supplementary. And then you've got angle 60 degrees over here. We're going to call that A, so a different A than the other example. And then I've got angle B, which is 120 degrees. So angle A and angle B are supplementary. Okay. So it says, identify angle pairs. Angle pairs that are adjacent. Well, they're right by each other. So angle 1 and angle 2 are right by each other. Angle 2 and 3, they're right by each other. Angle 3 and 4. Angle 4 and 5. And angle 5 and angle 1. They're all right next to each other. We're looking for vertical angle pairs, okay? So not trios or anything like that. So I know that angle 4 and angle 2 plus 1 would be, the measure of angle 2 plus 1 would be vertical pairs. I mean, they would be considered vertical angles, but we're only looking for pairs, okay? So 3 and 5 are only vertical pairs. So I've got the measure of angle 3 is equal to the measure of angle 5, or they're congruent. So I can say angle 3 is congruent to angle 5. Complementary. Complementary just means they add up to 90. So in this case, if you take a look around, there's no 90-degree angle, so this is actually none. And then supplementary means I've got two pairs that add up to 90. So 1 and 2 don't add up to 90, 2 and 3 don't add up to 90, but any angle pairs that form a straight line, that have a straight line beside them is going to be, not beside them, but angle 3 and angle 4, these two angles create a straight angle, which gives you a straight line. That's going to be a complementary pair. So angle 3, or supplementary, and 3 and 4 are supplementary. So angle 3 and angle 4 are supplementary. And then angle 4 and angle 5. Okay? Okay, and that is it for that part. So over here, it's asking what's going on here, and it says it wants to know what AFE and EFD are. So AFE is 62 degrees and EFD is 118 degrees. So if you take a look at these two, they together form a straight angle. Okay, so that means that the two add up to 180 degrees, and you can kind of see that 118 plus 62 is 180. So these are supplementary pairs. Okay. Angle AFE and angle BFC. So AFE and BFC. I don't think they're anything. Oh, no. Okay, 62 plus 28, my bad. They are complementary pairs, my bad. That was embarrassing. Yeah, they add up to be 90, okay? Angle BFC and angle CFD, BFC and CFD, they are also complementary pairs. Right, if I wanted to draw this in, I've got, since this is 62, this is 62. Okay. So just to double check, since vertical angles are congruent, 62 plus 28 is indeed 90 degrees. So they are complementary pairs. So even though it didn't have the box in there, we can now understand that this is a right angle. So over here, this is a right angle. And it says AFE and CFD are vertical angles, which we just said, so they are congruent. Man, we are trucking. We are almost done with this entire thing. Just a few more to do. Okay to assume true. So let's start with do not assume true. It may look like W is the midpoint of PQ, but they have not stated that the two measures are equal. The only time that you have two measures are equal whenever someone hands you a diagram is when you've got a tick. Okay, so this little tick on this line segment means TW is congruent to WV. Okay, it does not have a double tick for PW and WQ. So we have no idea whether these two things are congruent. It may look like it. We cannot assume that PW is congruent to WQ. Can't do this. So do not assume. Also, it may look like these two things are perpendicular, so they form a right angle. Unless they specify that there's a right angle in there, you can't assume that's true. Okay, so up here I had to show that these two pairs were complementary, that these add up to be 90 degrees. I actually didn't know it until I had this vertical angle. I had to make sure. So 62 is the same as 62. Those two add up to be 90 degrees. They didn't tell us from the start that that was a 90-degree angle. Kind of looked like it. So it may look like it, and you may be able to show that this is a right angle at some point, but you cannot assume it unless they draw that little box in there. So if they have that little box in there, you're good. If they don't, you can't assume it. So do not assume that if two angles look to be right angles, that they are they're perpendicular or 90 degrees to each other. So we can't assume that any of the angles, can't assume any angle pairs are 90 degrees, not angle pairs, just angles. Any angles are 90 degrees unless specified or denoted. Okay? Things that are okay to assume true. You can assume if you got ticks on stuff, It's cutting me. Something is cutting me. You can assume that the measure of TW, in this case, is equal to the measure of WV, okay? Or that those two segments are congruent, as long as they have ticks, okay? And then we can also say that angle PWT is congruent to, so PWT, this angle, is congruent to VWQ, or QWV, so QWV. So these two angles are congruent because they are vertical angles. You can always assume vertical angles are congruent. So if that's true, then we also have TWQ. Angle TWQ is congruent. TWQ is congruent to PWV. Okay. So I'm going to end with this one and then splice the video together. A linear pair is a pair of adjacent angles whose non-common sides are a straight angle. So here's a picture. So angle 1 and angle 2. Okay? If two angles form a linear pair, then they are supplementary. Okay? Supplementary. So same situation. We can say that angle 1 and 2 are supplementary. So the next part of the video will be just doing these exercises. I think I'll finish that after school when no one is here. And yeah.